I'm Asger. You can ask me anything. Today I'm answering this question: what will be the biggest challenges in our world 50 years from now? So if you look online for an answer to this question, you'll see many suggestions. Here are just a few of them. Genetic modifications, an increased aged population, lost cities sinking into the sea, social media, geopolitics, lack of resources, artificial intelligence, nuclear war, bioweapons, climate change, collapse of ecosystems, asteroids, volcanoes, solar flares, water shortage, overpopulation, or underpopulation. There are just so many things. And then on top of that are, of course, all the things that we can't imagine. Now, one way of looking at this question is to perhaps imagine that we were sitting 50 years ago. So that would be 1970. What would a discussion have looked like back then? I actually watched a little clip just a few days ago with Arthur C. Clarke, the science fiction writer. He was talking about personal computers. This was in, like the mid 80s or something like that. He made some very accurate predictions about how personal computers would be now, essentially. And he was just spot on. He looked at the technology that was sort of in a relatively early stage back then, and then he simply just imagined that this technology would be widely embraced. So I think that's actually a reasonable assumption to do here. But again, development, especially in the tech sector, has gone, it's just exponential, or so it seems from an outsider perspective at least. So it's probably reasonable to assume that some of these new technologies that we're seeing the early stages of right now, such as quantum computing, genetic modifications, social media even, will have a massive impact on us all in the future. And at least some of them probably already do impact us quite significantly. But I actually want to focus on human psychology. Now, we know quite a lot about what makes humans thrive and also what makes them wither inside, so to speak. So what we can do is we can look at the intersection between this constantly developing technology, imagine how it may look in the future, and then we can speculate how that might affect us all on a psychological level. Now, one thing I just want to comment on briefly here is, so Steven Pinker wrote this book a few years back called The Better Angels of Our Nature. As friendly and harmless as Steven Pinker looks, this book is really brutal. It just goes into detail about all sorts of crazy habits and propensities humans have had throughout the ages. In medieval times in Europe, people would torture and burn cats alive just for the fun of it. Just that was entertainment. It was pre-Netflix, right? But so he sort of makes a very strong case that we are seeing a constant moral, quote unquote, improvement as we move through the ages. I sort of agree with that, but I also think there's a potential fallacy here that just because that's how it's been so far doesn't mean that it'll always keep being like that. There's an observation bias in a sense, especially when we consider a completely, I was born in 1981. The world of today is, it's just so different from the world I grew up in. And even people who are 25 today see this change too. It's so significant. We can only really imagine how the world will look 50 years from now. But what we can do is we can, of course, take these new technologies that are sort of early stage right now. And I think, social media has been around, how long has Facebook existed? Like 12, 13 years by now. And it has actually changed a lot of structures. We're seeing teenagers, even preteens in some cases, paying some pretty significant prices for interactions on social media these days. Increased depression, poor self-image, always constant comparing yourself to other people online. But I see some much bigger issues with social media. So we have these emerging technologies. Social media has been around for a while. Then we have artificial intelligence. Now these algorithms, they sort of work in the background of all of this. We don't really know exactly what they're capable of, how they manipulate our behaviors right now. All we know is that they're there and they do manipulate our behaviors. But I think we need to understand that in the future, and this is probably not going to be a very distant future, maybe, let's just say 10 years from now, almost all technology will have these algorithms in the background And the main difference probably from these algorithms now and by then is that they will all be self-learning by then. Because it's really all about the bottom line for the people who create these algorithms. So let's say I run a social media. What I want is just more traffic. That is probably more or less my only objective. Grabbing people's attention. So if I have one algorithm that is, it's like a set in stone algorithm. This is just what it does. When people do this, exhibit this behavior, this happens. And if I compare that to a self-learning algorithm that can get to know every single user on a personal level on my social media platform, if that converts better, in terms of the results I want, more focus on more time spent on my social media platform, that is the one I'll use. End of story. So let's talk quantum computing. So this has been a buzzword for a good 10 years now, I guess. So I'm really not 100% on the forefront about what's happening in this area right now, but I know enough to know that they are sort of making strides, not as fast as they had hoped, but once we have a fully functional quantum computer that the average person, and maybe more importantly, that the average company can purchase and use, we're gonna see instant computations of very complex data. So if we pair this with AI, especially perhaps self-learning algorithms, we're faced with a completely novel scenario that, it's hard to even fathom, let alone speculate what this might lead to. It's gonna be a brutal wake-up call for many of us, I suspect. But exactly how it'll be utilized, it's really hard to imagine. But so let's say this, for instance. So large corporations typically create different scenarios, and then they try to sort of imagine which one of these scenarios is the most likely outcome if we do this, if we do that, if we do that. But all of these different scenarios are subject to computation power. And it may seem trivial to you, but it's actually not. If we have huge data sets, we can do calculations and try to predict human behavior with certain probabilities. And imagine a world where this just happens instantly. Just like that, you ran 10 billion simulations of various scenarios, and you know that if we do this, this will highly likely be the outcome. And so of course this is scary and weird, hard to even imagine in the hands of a few mega corporations. But it's even more mind-blowing or hard to wrap your mind around with this technology in the hands of everybody. And 50 years from now, it probably will be. So I don't think we're gonna look at a scenario where we can ask Alexa or Siri some question and they'll seem more human, or they'll seem as human as we do. It'll be a different scenario, I think. I suspect that it'll rather be, so you have like a little box in your home, maybe, with which is essentially an Alexa or a Siri combined with a quantum computer and self-learning algorithms. And this box will know, quote unquote, what you want, how you feel, what you should do before you even start asking yourself these questions. Now that is going to change everything. And I think it's going to be very hard for us to maintain our humanity, whatever that is. And I also sort of suspect that there might be some ideological movements against this. So let me just ask you a rhetorical question. Let's say you had a super app on your phone, and you could always just tap this app, open it, and it would tell you what to do in any given situation for a maximal happiness long-term outcome. Would you use the app to make important decisions in your life? I think most people wouldn't, but some people would. And this will create a weird dynamic in society, a weird division. So if we pair this with these early stage CRISPR technology we have, where people can almost like do it yourself genetic modifications at home, we'll probably have a subset of the population who will use these apps to not just make important life decisions, but to also modify themselves and their offspring genetically. What that could lead to in just 1 or 2 generations, I'm not quite sure, but we could probably see the birth of a new cognitive elite in a few generations. With this technology applied, it could completely change the nature of the average person using this technology. And I can really only assume that there's going to be some sort of conflict between the people using this technology, and that's also going to be defined of who can afford to use this technology, and the people who don't use it or don't want to use it for ideological reasons. And I'm actually not erring on one side or the other just yet. Now, these were just some very broad stroke thoughts on the matter, but I do have an answer to your question. But I need to segue into it, and we're gonna talk about return to social media. So social media, I gotta say, so I'm an expat living 5,000 miles from my family and friends. So in that sense, I'm really happy I have social media. I can sort of follow people's lives on the sideline. So when I visit them once a year or once every other year, I'm not surprised that they have 3 new kids and all that stuff. So there are some upsides to it, of course, obviously. And there's more than that. I mean, I can record this video, you can watch it, listen to it, we can ping pong, together we can become smarter, hopefully, even. But there's also some serious downsides to it. I was going over my Facebook profile yesterday, and I noticed that, so I posted a photo. It was just a silly photo of myself lying on the ground, 100 likes, right? Then I shared a podcast episode and a short film I directed. This is just 2 other examples. So these get no comments, no attention, 5 likes, something like that. But I spent 1 minute taking the photo, uploading it, but maybe 100 or 150 hours creating the short film, and in the case of the podcast episode, maybe 15 hours creating it. So there's like this weird discrepancy between the dogma that I was brought up with, that if you work hard, you'll be rewarded. Social media seems to work the other way around. I mean, if I take the easy way out, I'll be rewarded for that. If I put in the hard work, nothing comes out of it, hardly. This is just a little observation. Of course, it's anecdotal, I know that. But if you pair that to what we can see in teenagers and preteens as well, and just in young people, this goes for young adults as well, with the increased focus on just being judged essentially by the people that you're on social media with. We're not coming closer to each other as human beings. And honestly, I mean, this is just my personal opinion, but at the end of the day, all we have is each other. I mean, I really mean that. The friendships I have, the real friendships I have, whatever that means, I actually really deeply value them. Friends and family, those relations where you can just sit and not judge each other, sit and disagree and teach each other stuff. The more removed we are from each other in a physical and a mental sense, the worse we'll keep feeling. It's becoming clear to me and many others that there is no real purpose in life. We can create our own purposes and narratives, and we can have a meaningful life regardless of that. But it's more challenging. But if we combine this observation with a visit to the Pew website, this is just a website where you can look at all sorts of data sets. It's a really fascinating resource. So we look at some of the data on there. The Christian and the Muslim population groups are growing much more than all the other population groups, regardless of how we classify them, agnostics, atheists, Buddhists. But if we just look at it, and this is of course statistics, so it's all else equal logic I'm applying here, but if we just look at those numbers, it is clear that we're gonna definitely, within the next 50 years and way before that, we're gonna see these 2 huge population groups. The vast majority of people living on this planet will belong to one of these 2 groups. These 2 groups don't like each other. So pair that fact with the fact that we are being removed from each other mentally, psychologically, if you will, via social media. I think we're facing a really bad situation where, in an effort to create or find meaning, people could become even more entrenched in these ideologies. I'm just referring to these two biggest religions in the world as ideologies. I really think people could become even more entrenched and insisting on their ideologies being the right one in an effort to find meaning in an increasingly obviously meaningless world. I think that's going to be the biggest challenge 50 years from now. And I might add to that, just from a more global perspective, I think war is still, however it may look in the future, whether it's just being fought by drones, but again, drones governed by AI, and drones can carry bioweapons, drones can make strategic decisions, as it is right now. 50 years from now? So just to sum up, I think we're going to face some significant psychological challenges. Loneliness, division will be probably the two biggest ones, and people will seek meaning and purpose somewhere, because technology can't bring us that. Maybe it can sometime in the future. This is actually something else I want to say. We've made so many strides in science in general, but there's like the applied science, which is computer science, engineering to a wide extent, and then there's the philosophical science, or the soft sciences, the social science. And it strikes me that we're really just implementing all this, the engineering, computer science, without stopping and asking any questions about whether that's really smart. But we aren't really being informed by psychology and social science to the extent that we could be. Yeah, let me know what you think in the comments below. And again, you can ask me absolutely anything on this channel, and please do so in the comments below this video. I'll be back tomorrow with a new video. Until then, have a good one. Thanks for watching. Cheers. Oh, and please do subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Have a good one.